Welcome back, everyone. I'm Stacia.
I'm Jordan.
Let's get completely checked out.
Oh yeah. Today is
Oh my
gonna
god.
be a doozy.
Yeah, I hate to do this to people. I really do, but I'm gonna do one of my favorite books today, and it's a very big doozy. I've had friends read it, and they're like, "Sasha, what the absolute fuck?" But it's one of my favorites, and I know that there's a very niche group out there who like these kind of books, so I'm gonna do it anyway. Um, won't be an every time thing, so I don't want people to think like these are the kind of books you're gonna get every time from me. But God, it's just such a good book.
Yeah, so I think
You have one.
I'll
Go
be
ahead.
going first because it'll be a lot lighter
Yes.
compared. So this is actually a book that Sasha and I have both read.
Mhm.
It was a part of our book club, and it's called Perfect Strangers by
Ugh.
JT Gessinger. I don't know how to say her last
Your
name.
guess is as good as mine. This
Yeah.
book was just like a 10 out of 10 for me when I read it, and that's saying
hmm
something.
Yeah, I also rated it very, very highly, but to give some like maybe not so high ratings to make everyone's perception a little bit better. Storygraph, people rated it a 4.1. Goodreads, people rated it a 4.2. And then Fable rated it a 4.17. So,
As long as it's in the fours, I think that's
yeah,
fine.
thank God
I
it's a
mean,
four.
if it was like in the threes, I think I would have rioted. Because
Oh,
everyone's so
100%.
different. I can see
Yeah.
maybe how people didn't give this one certain ratings, but as long as it's in the fours, I'll take it. 100%.
Yeah, I mean, there was like a part in this book where there is a twist in this book. It is romance. It's not fantasy. It's based in like real life. It takes place in Paris. But basically there is a twist, so I'll be marking that time if you want to read the book, a time for you to skip so you don't get the spoilers. However, the twist, I had put my book down, picked up my phone,
Mhm.
and called my boyfriend and said, "You will not believe the shit I just read." And he doesn't give a fuck, but I was like, my brain, I
Yeah.
was questioning my own reality after reading that twist because I was just like,
Ugh.
what? What?
It was one of those twists where like I had to physically close the book and walk out of the
hmm
room because I
100%.
was like, yeah, I there because there are twists like that where
Mhm.
you're like, oh my, like what did I just read? What just
Yep.
happened? Uh,
Yep. Yep. Yep.
so yeah, I totally get that. I didn't have anyone to call because I was like, I don't know who to. I would have called
Right.
you, but unfortunately, you had to actually read the book. So,
Yes.
but
Yes. You read it way before me.
I did. I did get to it just because I knew it was coming up and I was like, when I picked up this book, I remember initially I was like, yeah, I'm in the mood for a romance right now. Like I just
Mhm.
want a silly little fun smutty romance. And then what I
And it
got
is
was like
definitely smutty.
it is definitely smutty, but what I got was like so much better than I bargained for
Oh my
because
God, I
like
know.
yeah, I don't
It
understand.
might be the perfect type of like romance book where
Yeah.
it has all the romance and the character building. It's POV,
Yes.
but it has the twist that just makes you like, oh my God.
Yeah, I'm a sucker
Yeah.
for a twist. That's like it's hard to shock me nowadays just because I've read so many different plot lines, but
Right.
that one, I just think I wasn't expecting it to because like you said, it's a romance. What romances have
Have
twists in them?
twists. I know. The only
Uh,
ones that really ever have twists are like the enemies to lovers or like the
yeah.
friends to lovers because they always end up getting into a stupid fight for some reason.
Yeah, I definitely think it was like the quote unquote perfect book where it has like a little bit of everything. It has a little
Right.
bit of everything everybody
hmm
loves. So I
Yeah.
think no matter like what you're into, it's going to give you some of that. Cuz you know me, I do palate
hmm
cleansers sometimes.
Right. I was just gonna say, I feel
Romance.
like this would be such a good palate cleanser. Like if you're in a rut from reading too much fantasy, or if you're in a
Mhm.
rut for reading too much like horror, this is like such a good middle palate
Yeah.
cleanser because
Like
it does have the twist, but
I want to personally meet the author and thank her. Be like,
I
you
know.
really you really did all of that.
Thank you so
Uh
much.
yeah, this is one that like no matter if you stick around for the twist or not. It's one that you should
Mhm.
definitely put on your TBR.
Right.
It's
100%.
just too incredible.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited.
So, yeah, so let me do like a I guess like a synopsis.
Yeah,
It's basically there's two main characters, okay? It's a heartbroken author. She goes to Paris for like healing, inspiration, but she ends up finding this hot stranger
the
who
dream.
ignites this like love affair, whirlwind romance. You're in Paris, the city of love, and all that stuff. But there's that twist. It's definitely spicy, like we have already talked about, and for sure a roller coaster, and you will be getting whiplash from the
Yes.
twist. That's for sure. But yeah, the two main characters are Olivia and James. Olivia is an author, and she's going to Paris for 3 months to kind of like get a break. She suffered from a tragedy, which I'm not going to say what the tragedy is, but it completely like crushes her, and she's like totally consumed by grief and depression. So
Mhm.
her manager is giving her condo, I guess, in Paris. And she's staying there for the 3 months to kind of work her shit out, get a breath of fresh air. They're from the States. So she obviously traveled pretty far. And she ends up at this cafe, and the French waiter does not like her.
Nope.
And she kind of gets into a little argument with the guy. And that's when she kind of spots James because he's kind of like looking at her, chuckling.
Mhm.
And James is an artist that is living in Paris and is just super hot and super mysterious. So her timeline in Paris is end of September. I'm going back to the States. You know, she's trying to work through her writer's block because of the grief. She's like in the works of writing this book, and her, agent is like, you need to finish this book. Like, I need the book
Yeah.
finished by this time. So hopefully France will be a good like change of scenery.
Can we just take a
James,
minute to like
oh yeah.
understand that I wish we could all just jet off to Paris or any
Oh my
European country
God.
whenever
I
we
know.
have a problem.
Yeah.
I don't think this girl realizes how good she has it, but that's
Hmm.
on her.
Right.
Anyway.
Yeah. And I mean, being sat in a table across from James, who is also sat at a table alone,
Yes.
seeing him in all of
This
his
is
mysterious glory. Ugh. Tall,
this is
dark, and
where I
handsome
did think
man. Like, mm,
this is where I did think the book was really cheesy because I was like, "Oh good. We're he's obviously the protagonist. That's great."
yeah.
So like when I started this book, it was like, "Okay, Stasha, it's a palate cleanser. Like it's going to be cheesy. It's going to be predictable."
Yep.
And then it
Yeah.
rocked my world. So,
Yeah.
anyway.
I mean, and predictable in the sense where, like, when they first see each other at the cafe, whatever, it's
Mhm.
really not that big of a deal. And then she is at the apartment complex or the condo building.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, he lives in the apartment building. Of course he
What a
does. Where else would he live?
coincidence.
Oh no,
Where
seriously.
else would he live?
Yep. And of course, they just keep running into each other. The owner of the building is trying to convince her to like go to this building occupants like get together or whatever, like little soiree that he's hosting. So,
Matchmaker.
they actually have a real conversation then, and they kind of
Mhm.
keep spending time with each other because they're like, there is something here.
Yeah.
However, they don't want any strings attached. So they're like, okay,
Mhm.
you know my first name, I know your first name, and that's as deep as this goes.
Yeah.
Then they kind of keep dropping little details about themselves because it just like comes up like either
Naturally.
naturally or someone says something. Like I'm pretty sure the building guy was the one that mentioned that James was an artist and that she was an author.
Oh,
So,
yes. I
so
remember that.
yeah. So anyway, they start hooking up a lot,
Yeah.
a lot. Like they cannot keep their hands off of each other.
Book's muddy.
Yeah, and the no strings attached vibes, like, does not stick for long, like, they
It does
become, like,
never.
infatuated with each other, and they are both not sure about the other's situation. Like, there was a
Mhm.
time where she was like, "He has to have someone," because she did have a husband in the
Yes.
States, and she never disclosed that information, but he does pop up and make a surprise appearance, even though they are separated.
Yes.
Avoid spoilers and skip to 2547.
That's kind of where this plot twist takes hold because all of a sudden there's like people after them and crazy stuff starts happening. She like escapes to his room and weird that his lock is her birthday to get into
Yes,
his
the
apartment.
passcode.
The passcode thing was fucking weird. Like that's where like we both read Haunting Adeline.
Yes.
So the fact that the way Zayd was with the stalking,
Mhm.
this guy wasn't stalking, but the passcode thing was fucking weird.
Well, and it's because, like,
I
you
don't
kind
know.
of have to realize that they really hadn't been, like, hooking up for that long. I think it was, like, what, a week or 2 or whatever?
I think
So
I think it was about at least a month. It was definitely
oh,
at
okay,
least a
my
month
time was
for sure. Because I think when they first met, I think maybe like 2 weeks had passed, and then
mm.
they started hooking up because they kept getting closer to September, and they just kept
Oh,
talking about
yes.
that. So, I
I
think
mean,
all of
it's
this
still weird.
happened. Oh my god, of course it's still weird. So
Like,
odd,
if I
but
was dating a man for a month and my birthday was his passcode, I'd be like,
that is
sir,
strange.
that's
Yeah.
strange. That's a red flag,
Mhm. Yeah, and I
definitely."
mean, the other thing too, like there's just so many things that were odd as well. Like his phone was odd and how I think he had like a bunch of like tabs on her. Like he had so much
Yeah.
information about her on his phone and she was just like, why is he doing all this digging? Which then we ended up finding
Yes.
out, he's not
Yeah, yeah,
just
yeah,
the
yeah.
artist, like he has connections.
Yes, being an
So
artist was just kind of a
a
cover for him.
cover,
Yeah.
exactly. But yeah, I that is honestly where the plot twist starts unfolding. That is
Mhm.
not the plot twist. So if you
Nope.
are interested in not hearing the plot twist, then skip. I'll put the time to where you can skip, but I will be discussing the plot twist right now.
Yee.
Avoid spoilers and skip to 2547.
They're in the countryside of France. They've been living there for months. She's pregnant with his kid. They think they have
Yes.
outrun whoever was trying to kill them or follow them or whatever.
Yes.
And there is lavender fields in their garden, and she's watching him in the garden, and all of a sudden he like disappears. And she's like kind of freaking out, like, where is he? And then Olivia wakes up in a hospital bed-esque setting because none of that actually happened. She went
Literally,
in to this psychosis, and the psychosis was her in that dream world with this perfect guy and cared about her, loved her, but none of it was real.
literally since the beginning of this book, the whole plot line was like her psychosis. Like that was just it was very Shutter Islandy in a
It
sense.
was, oh my God. When she woke up in that hospital bed and her
Mhm.
real husband was just such a douchebag. Oh my
Yes.
God, he was such a douchebag. And she couldn't talk, she can't do anything. Like, she's just bedridden.
I mean, and it all
And
seems so
like,
perfect and cheesy, and it's because, like, she was imagining this, like, better world for herself because her current one is just so terrible.
exactly. Exactly. But then it gets even crazier.
Yes.
That Olivia is not real either because it
Yep.
is a book written by another author, where we meet the real person that is writing this book, and they're talking to their agent, and the agent is like, you have to stop basing all these perfect male characters off of your husband.
Yep.
Because that's all of her romantic interests in all her books is her husband. So even
Goals.
that wasn't real. Her psychosis wasn't real. Her waking up in the hospital bed, trapped, no escape, wasn't real. It was all a book within a book within a book.
Yes.
Inception style. Fucking
It was
ridiculous.
So it was like a
Oh my
turducken.
God.
It was
a
crazy.
fucking turducken. You're 100% right. I just like, I remember when it turned into the agent and the author talking, and I go, hold the fuck on. What?
It's one of those books where you kind of have to like go back and check yourself and being like, okay, am I getting this correct? Because
Right. Am I going fucking crazy?
It was just so many layers. And like you said earlier, it was whiplash.
Yeah.
It was like back-to-back twists.
Yeah.
Holy cow. That one did a number on me, I remember.
Yeah.
Like seriously, whether you know the plot twist or not, you gotta read this book. It is
100%.
insane. And it is so well written for these like whiplashing plots.
Yeah. And I do have a couple quotes since I did a lot of quotes for the fantasy book. So here are a couple quotes that I loved. There are a ton of really good quotes in here. Obviously, none of it was real. So just keep that in mind. But this quote is kind of from the beginning. This was when, I'm pretty sure it was at the building party, the apartment building party. And he says to her, yes, but I was paying attention to you, looking like you wandered into the seventh circle of hell wearing this dress that nearly gave me a heart attack. Hot. Okay. And then he says a different quote about her. After a long, blistering moment, he murmurs, tell me I'm not the only one standing here feeling like I just stuck my finger into an electrical outlet. So this was like the start of their escapades or their sexcapades.
It was like so cheesy, but
so
like
cheesy.
Sometimes you really need cheesy. Like, sometimes you need that
yeah.
Hallmark movie or that like smutty book. You just kind of need that little dose.
Oh my God, for sure. Yeah. This is one of my favorite lines that I actually cackled when I read it. So Kelly in the psychosis dream is her best friend, but Kelly outside of the psychosis was actually like her nurse friend. Okay, so in the psychosis, this is what Kelly says. They talked a lot on the phone when she was in Paris. So Kelly shouts, oh my God, did you do sex with James? She was always using verbs in unique ways like that. Do sex instead of have sex. Her husband finds it irritating, but I think it's cute. I say coyly, I don't know. What's your definition of sex? And she says, when the outie enters the innie, duh. I was cackling. That is the funniest shit I've ever read.
Literally was like, I get the character. I get the like need for the humor, but I was like, I could not be friends with Kelly.
Oh my God. I feel like I am Kelly.
No, because if you used grammar like that, I would lose my mind.
I do use grammar like that sometimes.
You do not. Not like that.
I do it, like ironically.
Yeah, ironically. If you used it like legitimately,
no. Oh God, no.
Ironically is fine. No, if it's for the bit, I'm fine.
Right. It's
Kelly was
not always for the bit.
Kelly was not for the bit.
Kelly was for the bit because she didn't even exist.
You know what? Yeah, Kelly was the bit.
Yeah, she was the bit.
It's definitely like it's definitely all kind of confusing, but it makes a lot of sense. It's one of those books you do have to pay attention to, which I didn't realize at first because there's so many different connections between her psychosis.
Oh my God, yeah.
And her outside of her psychosis, just like the lavender. Because if I remember correctly, in her psychosis, she's living in this field of lavender, and then when she wakes up, it's because like the painting in her room at the hospital has like lavender field. Yeah, which
Mhm.
is just absolutely crazy. There's just so much to it.
Yeah.
Um,
And let's not forget that also she gets sent from the hospital back to her house so her husband can take care of her. And so she has
mhm.
that live-in nurse.
Yes.
And I'm pretty sure the live-in nurse brings her like a lavender essential oil, or is it like lavender
Yeah.
flowers? But she was able to re-trigger that psychosis with the lavender,
Mhm.
and she ends up seeing James like in the sliding glass door
Yeah.
or like something like that. She sees his reflection and she's able to fall back into the psychosis, which is how we get out of that book and into actual real life with the author
Mhm.
and the agent talking about this story.
Yes. That was
Yeah,
one
it's so
that
crazy.
I can never I can never I don't know how much I love that, like, 3rd plot twist of it being
The
a
author
book
in the
inside a
book.
book. Yeah,
Yeah.
a part of me loves and a part of me was like, was the 3rd plot twist necessary?" Obviously, in the end, I just loved it. I think it was just regardless great, and, who if I get it, if my life was that shitty and I need to go into a psychosis, I would try to trigger it as well.
Of
Like,
course.
who would not do that? But
Yeah.
this book is just
So good.
fantastic.
So,
I
so
need more like it.
I
I like
agree.
a bit of thriller within my smut when I do read it.
Agreed. That's also kind of why I like You Shouldn't Have Come Here, which is more, it is
Yes.
romance and thriller, but it ends thriller. Like it
Yeah.
starts romance and then it
Mhm.
ends in thriller,
Yes, I
kind of
thought
horror a
about
little
doing that
bit.
one as well. That one is kind of marketed though more as a thriller, whereas
Oh, yeah,
Perfect
for sure.
Strangers, if you look at the
Is
cover,
definitely a romance.
it looks like a romance. Like the cover of it is like two very attractive people making out in like the rain or whatever. And
Yep.
so when you look at it, you're like, ah, yes,
You
a
know what you're
romance.
getting.
Yeah, well, you think you know what you're getting, and then you get to the twist, and
Right,
you're like,
right, right.
did they like misprint this, or like what's
Yeah.
happening here?
But when you
Uh,
read You Shouldn't Have Come Here, you're like, oh, there's like romance
yes,
lingering between these two people.
and I like
There's
that because like
tension.
a lot of people I know, and like if you're one of these people, I love you, don't worry. But I can't stand what I call rom-com books. Like
Yeah.
anything written by I think like Emily Henry, like all of those ones that it's just a rom-com in a book. I don't know why I can't do it. It's like I do it once in a while when I need like a palate cleanser,
Right.
but it is not something that I could sit down and read because it's like the same storyline over and over again. But
Yeah.
this that's why go ahead.
Now I was just gonna say, I think that's kind of why I like those books, because it is the same
Yeah.
storyline. And if you are like me, where I watch the same TV show every single night,
Mhm.
you probably also enjoy reading the same storyline in books every single time because you know what you're getting, which I think is kind of why a lot of people that read fantasy like similar fantasy books.
Yeah.
Like if you liked Akatar, you also liked Fourth Wind because it's like so similar in that like fantastical sense, which is why,
Jordan, you
yeah.
didn't need to call me out this morning. Like
I'm just saying.
I know
And
you're
I
no,
feel
you're
like
so right.
that's not a bad thing. You know what you like? Like me, I know what I like and
Mhm.
I'm going to keep reading it. I don't care how
Yep,
many times I've read that same plot. Like it's always going
I
to be
get that.
so good.
It happens in thriller and horror sometimes too with like certain tropes. Like I just read a book that I'm actually going to do for the podcast called Baby Teeth. It was a great book.
Mm.
However, it was similar. It was a very similar plot to like two other books that I've read. So that
Okay.
wasn't kind of like so I get it because it was a type of plot, you know, that I've read before, but I still really thoroughly enjoyed the book. So I get it. I'm not saying I don't. I just couldn't do it. I'm not trying to yuck anyone's yum on this podcast. That's not what I'm here for. I'm just saying that I personally can't do it. But if that's your thing, go for it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh no, 100% agree with you.
Oh yes.
But
Well,
yeah, so that was Perfect Strangers. Highly recommend you read it. If you
oh yes.
skipped the spoiler, definitely read it. It is so good. And I think I finished that book in like 2 or 3 days. Like I finished it so quickly.
Oh, I finished it I think that was like a less than 24-hour one for me, if I remember correctly.
So good.
Yeah, no matter if you listen to the spoilers or not, please go read it.
Oh
It
yeah,
has it's one of it's the perfect book in my opinion.
it really is.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I went to the girl who runs our book club, and then she took it off for some reason. I think at one point, and I told her, I said, "Nope, put it back on there. You're gonna want to read it. You're gonna
Stick it
want to."
back on there. It's so good.
Oh my god, yeah.
And I
I don't
think
know if I went to
it's been
that
a
meeting yet.
favorite.
Oh really?
Hmm.
Yes, that book
Yeah.
club. Shout out to Palm Beach Babes. I That book club does really love a good thriller, which I love for them,
Yeah.
and then that definitely
So
had
good.
thriller vibes. All right, are you ready to get into something that's maybe not so sweet and fuzzy?
Oh yeah.
I don't think you are. It's okay. I We did a traveling my friends from college and I did like a traveling book club where we each chose a book and I chose this one. And after I like initially chose it for them to read, I was like in my head I was like, maybe I shouldn't have done this one for them. Maybe I should have eased them into the world of horror and thriller instead of like, you know, throwing them in the deep end because that's exactly
Right.
what I did. I didn't
Yeah.
give them like a nice little mild thriller. I was like, I'm going to throw you in the deep end and you're just going to see what happens. And that was my fault. And if any of those 5 girls are listening, I am so sorry. Not that sorry, but I am sorry. Um so today I'm doing a book called Tender is the Flesh, already an ominous title.
Oh,
The author, she's from Argentina. So this book was actually written in Spanish and translated, which I love. Her name is Agustina Bazterrica. I want to say Bazterrica. Yeah, I don't know. I think that's
yeah.
how it's pronounced. If you look up Tender is the Flesh, it's going to come up. This book is so popular within the horror community.
But written by a
Uh,
woman.
Written by a woman. Yes.
I think I've noticed that a lot of like thriller horror that you like, because
Mhm.
you've like told me them, are written by like men,
Yeah, we don't
which
get
is
a lot of
interesting.
yes, we don't get a lot of female writers, which stinks. So when we do, like there are some really good ones out there like Minka Kent, Lucinda Berry. Oh,
Everyone
there
likes
are
Frida.
oh my god, everyone loves listen, I'm going to say this once on this podcast and you either love this opinion or you hate it and I really don't care. But Frida McFadden is the thriller equivalent to Colleen Hoover. She is so easy to read. She has one or two ones that I've loved, but she's basic. You basic, you know? And I love that for people who want to get into thrillers. Like if you read The Housemaid, great for you. But I can't read Frida
Yeah, I feel
anymore.
like
But
she's
Frida
a
Mc
good starter
yes,
to get
and
you
there's
into it.
yes, she is. There's a couple of other women writers that I can't think of off the top of my head, but I'm trying to think of who wrote The Hunting Party. She also wrote The Paris Apartment. I'll
Mhm.
figure it out. But there are some really great women authors out there. Unfortunately, I wish there were more.
100%.
But
I
yeah,
think a
she's
lot
just
of like you see a lot of women writers doing fantasy rather than like horror. So
yeah, and
it's interesting
romance.
that this book, which is an
Mhm.
insane book,
It's
is written by
crazy.
a female in the horror industry rather than a man. So that's
Yeah,
really cool.
and there's a lot of topics in this book that it's kind of like as a woman, I think a lot of women tend to kind of steer clear of in a sense, but there's people like me who just love a good thriller and they love a good morbid topic and that's just what she gives us. I will say she has another book out of short stories. That was not my favorite book. I didn't love it. I know she's coming out with another book here soon and I'm hoping it gives me a little more of what this book was because I believe this was her first book. So yeah, Tender is the Flesh. It is a dystopian horror. So I'm a big dystopian galley. I grew up with The Hunger Games, Divergent, Maze Runner. We the Fifth Wave. We love a good dystopian book. So this is a dystopian horror. We are in the far future. She clocks in about 209 pages. She's not a very long book, but she does pack a punch. I gave this book a 5 out of 5. I thought this book was great. It gave me a plot twist. It gave me, a morbid plot. It made me think, which was great. Goodreads though unfortunately has it as 3.78, which I get because that's the thing with horror and when you look at an overall rating, sometimes they're very low and it's because people read them and they're like, "Ooh, too dark, too dark." And for me, dark, I don't always think dark equals great. I think it has to be written very well because I've read dark books and I'm like, okay, you were just morbid for morbid's sake. There was no like point to it. Whereas this one I thought had a great point. I will say there's another girl I'm friends with from high school who read this. She gave it 2 out of 5 stars. And her reasoning was she's like, I felt like it was trying to teach me something. And I was like, yeah, it's supposed to kind of stimulate your mind a bit and like make you think about the meat processing industry. And she's like, yeah, I didn't want that. And I was like, you know what? Totally get it. It's not for everyone. So basically, I'm going to give you the trigger warnings, and it's a grocery list of trigger warnings. We have animal cruelty, gore, violence, child death, homophobia, human trafficking, pedophilia, sexual assault, cannibalism, and torture. Yeah,
A
I told y'all it was going to
doozy.
be dark, but
Too many triggers? Skip to 46 minutes.
it's just buckle in. You'll be great. Okay, so we are setting
Fine.
this just you'll be great. We are setting this dystopian future where animals have contracted a virus and we cannot consume animals any longer. We can't eat cow meat, sheep or goat meat, chickens. We can't eat any of it. So of course the world is like, well, if we can't eat meat, where are we going to get that large source of protein? Because, we can eat beans and tofu and stuff, but it's not as big of a source of protein as meat is. So everyone decides that we are going to have something called special meat. That's what it's called, special meat. So special meat are basically humans, but they are genetically engineered. So it's not like they went out to families and like took children or adults and were like, we're just going to eat you. They like genetically engineered humans for the purpose of having that meat. So I think it's important to make that connection of like these people, not that it's right, that's not what I'm saying, but it's important to make the distinction of they didn't like take someone's family member or a friend. It was like, it's like how we do in the meat industry. Like no one comes to your house and takes your cat to eat. Like, people genetically engineer chickens and, all that stuff in the meat processing industry. So the way they're engineered is they grow faster, they have no vocal cords, they're raised in small cages. I believe their tongues are taken out or something like that. And, it's supposed to sound familiar because this is quite literally how the meat industry is, which is what I loved about it. They were like, we're going to show you the reality of what the meat processing industry is like via a human character. So that's what these people are like. So, like I said, it's a good 180. It makes you it really does make you think about the meat processing industry. It's kind of like George Orwell's Animal Farm, which I know everybody doesn't love to think philosophically when they're reading a book. I do, just who I am. So now we're going to introduce our main character. His name's Marcos. Marcos is the manager at the meat house, and he gets a lot of fun firsthand accounts. So you kind of walk with him through the meat house. You see all the quote unquote livestock.
Is
You
it
see
from
the
his
process.
POV?
Yeah. So I
Okay.
can't remember if it was told for first or third person. I honestly can't remember off the top of my head. I want to say
Okay.
it's first, but you see it through his eyes. You
Okay.
see
Okay.
how they handle the special meat and how they process it. So you kind of get a firsthand account. The other thing you know about Marcos is he is down bad. So his wife has left him because they had a baby together and the baby passed away. And
Mm.
it was like sudden infant death syndrome, nothing they could do. So they kind of, his wife just was not in a good place. He left to go live with her mother and he's kind of by himself. So
Okay.
he's at work one day and, everybody kind of knows that he's going through it. So there's this breeder at the plant. I hate using that term, but there's this breeder and he's like, "Hey, I know you're down bad. I know you're not doing so hot. So this is a gift from me to you." And he ends up giving her one of these, I forget what they call them, but basically this girl who is supposed to be who's genetically made to be produced for meat, but it's this girl basically. And it's kind of like, if you went to a farm and they gave you a chicken to eat. It was the kind of the same concept of like, "Hey, you're going through it. Here's some food for you." So yeah, I have actually slaughtered chickens for a meal before, and I was very young. I was, like, in middle school, I think, but it was an interesting concept, and so it's interesting for me to think about, I dunked it boiling water to get the feathers off. I was there when they cut the heads off and everything, so it's kind of like, I don't know if I could do this to someone who looks like a human. So
Right.
it's It's kinda and it's like, they make the argument of like, "Oh, she's not human. Like, she doesn't come from a family." It's very interesting. So, yeah, he goes home, and basically by law, he's supposed to kill her and everything like that, but he doesn't. He's, like, super lonely, and so he does something incredibly fucked up. He ends up just keeping her. So he kinda
How
keeps her like a
old
pet.
yeah, how old would you say she
She
is?
is. So that's the thing is they grow very rapidly. It's never really mentioned how old she is, but since they said a trigger warning is pedophilia, I'm gonna assume maybe she's more of a teenager, maybe an older teenager, like 17 or 18 or something.
Yeah,
They never really give us a specific age. We just know she's kind of a young girl, and you have to remember she doesn't understand a lot because she's been raised in a cage.
right,
But he decides to, like, keep her, and he puts her in this room, and he feeds her, he takes care of her, he starts calling her Jasmine. He starts, like, treating her really well for something that's supposed to be, like, livestock in a sense.
right,
So, I'm not gonna get super into this particular part, but during this time, we get a lot of details about how the special meat is, like, bred, how they're executed, and they kind of explain the whole process, and it is basically the same process of when you butcher, like, cattle or chickens. Again, it's not the easiest thing in the world to read because it's supposed to make you uncomfortable. It's
right.
supposed to make you uncomfortable in a sense where, like, these things are happening, just not to humans. Like, this book almost made me vegetarian for a hot second. It didn't. I'm sorry. I'm still going meat, but it almost did. So, yeah, it just really makes you think about that and humanity and yada, yada, yada. Anyway, we're gonna
Right.
get back to Jasmine. Oh, go
I
ahead.
sorry, I just want to say I do think
Oh.
it's interesting because if you know about meat or like
Mhm.
birds or their eggs and whatever, like the chickens,
Yeah.
when they're treated better, they
Mhm.
taste better. That's
Yes. That's why
why,
people
like,
like
the Wagyu is so good because they
yes.
treat the cows like royalty and they're
Mhm.
fatty and they're eating good. And like when chickens can
Yes.
roam, like their eggs taste better, like their meat tastes
Yes.
better. They don't have all that like chemical stuff to pump them full of
Yes.
hormones to make them bigger or whatever.
Yes.
So it's interesting that even though we know that,
Mhm.
the way that they're raising the special meat is
Yeah.
sounds like it's the worst that they could ever treat these
Yeah, and it's kind of like how a
animals.
lot of big name brand not to, like, name
Right.
any specifically, like Tyson, but it's, how, they don't do a good job of taking care of their animals because it's just supply and demand. I
Right.
wish there was a way where we could, have our cake and eat it too, in a sense where we could raise livestock in a humane manner and still use it for meat because,
Right.
we are humans. We still need, well, most of us need meat. So I wish there was a best of both worlds. So this is why this book in particular is just absolutely crazy. But we're going to get back to Jasmine. That's the special meat that he has kept and named kind of like a pet. So at first he's, like I said, treating her like she was almost like a dog, like just treating her really well, like taking care of her, making sure she's healthy.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Is she clothed?
I wanna say she is. I wanna say he did, and he ends up so in the beginning, no, she's not clothed, they're very much like animals where they're naked.
Okay.
I wanna say that he does end up putting clothes on her, but I can't remember
Okay.
that particular detail. So then he absolutely starts losing it. Like, he is treating her so well, but now he's gonna transition to where he's gonna treat Jasmine like his wife. Like, he's gonna cuddle her and love on her, and
Ew.
so, obviously, this is, like, really illegal in this society. It's almost compared to, like, bestiality in a sense because
Mhm.
they're animals. So, when he goes to work and stuff like that, he has her in this room and, like, she's not chained up or anything, but he keeps cameras on her and he's watching her from work. He starts being really affectionate, and unfortunately, trigger warning, he does obviously have sex with her.
Ugh.
To my recollection, this is not something that she is necessarily opposed to, however, given the circumstances, it's still not okay.
Right. She
So
can't
she's not
fully consent.
no, because she has no idea. Like,
Right. She can't
it's
talk.
kind of yeah, it's kinda like Stockholm syndrome too in a sense where she is like, "Oh, he saved me. He's treating me well." Like,
Mhm.
it's very much giving Stockholm syndrome, which is
Oh
not
God.
great. So, she's not a human necessarily. She wasn't born in human society. She doesn't know how to operate like a human. So he has to like teach her everything. So, of course, because she is a human, she ends up getting pregnant. He impregnates her. We all kind of saw that coming. It is a double-edged
Mm.
sword because on one level, you're kind of oddly happy that she's being treated well and cared for and like a human in a sense, but also she's so vulnerable and she doesn't understand things, so it feels really gross. It is
Yeah.
definitely a double-edged sword. Like, if you ever saw the show You on Netflix,
Yep.
that was another good example of, like, "Oh, I love how well he treats her," but on the other side, like, he's a
He's
stalker, which is
fucking
it was
crazy.
yeah, so it's very conflicting when you're reading it. Like, I was very conflicted, and it was really weird.
Mhm.
So, since he starts caring for Jasmine, he kinda goes vegetarian, and he stops eating the special meat. He's slipping up at work. His father ends up passing away, and it's putting a lot of stress on his life, so he kinda starts almost neglecting Jasmine in a sense emotionally. He's not, like, cuddling up to her as much or loving on her as much, and his ex-wife starts calling to check up on him, and it kinda turns into a slippery slope. Remember, his ex-wife has no idea that he has this, like, livestock basically in their house. Alright, so this is where it's gonna get crazier than it already is. If for
Is
some
this where the
reason
twist happens?
this is where the twist happens. If you are somebody who wants to read this book, who doesn't want the twist, because, this book is already morbid, but it does have a crazy ass twist. So this is where I would kind of stop you if that was the case.
To avoid spoilers, skip to 46 minutes.
So, like I said, his father dies, and after the father's funeral, Marcos comes home to discover Jasmine is in labor. So she's starting to have this baby at home, and something is wrong. Like, something's really wrong, and obviously Marcos can't bring her to a hospital. So in this panic, he calls his ex-wife because his ex-wife is a nurse. So we're gonna bring in his ex-wife. Her name is Cecilia. So Cecilia's a nurse, and all he does is call her, and he's like, "There's a medical emergency. I can't take this individual to the hospital. Please get over here as soon as possible."
Mhm,
So
mhm,
as soon as
mhm.
Cecilia arrives, he drops all this information on her. He's like, "I got this
Oh.
livestock. I've been treating her like you. I got her pregnant. She's in labor." And you would think that she would be like,
You're
"Okay, that's a
crazy.
yeah, like, I'm gonna leave now." However, she doesn't miss a beat, and she just springs into action and starts helping deliver this baby. Like, she just gets on the ground and she's like, "All right, let's do it." So congrats, it's a
Interesting.
boy. She ends up giving birth to a baby boy, and, the first one to hold him is Marcos, and he's holding his son, and all of these thoughts just start racing through his head. His wife is physically back in the home. There's a new baby, reminding you they lost a baby together, and he wants Cecilia to be the mother of this baby, not Jasmine. So in an instant, Marcos just kills Jasmine.
What?
He gets in his head, he's like, "I have a baby again, I have my wife back, this is the life I want, I don't want this person I've been putting all my emotions onto." Now you think that Cecilia, after all of this, she's just absorbed a lot of information.
Mhm.
Her husband just killed someone, even if in their society it's not looked as a human, he did kill someone.
Yes.
If that was me, I would be scared
Of
and,
course.
freaking out. She's not scared, she's pissed. She's not pissed that he lied to her, she's not pissed that she had to deliver a baby. She's mad that he killed Jasmine because, in her words, if they kept Jasmine alive, Jasmine could have kept giving them more babies. Yeah, that was a long silence, as it should be. So, this book is
Uh,
just incredibly cruel in so many ways. It is one of the most horrifying and brutal books I've ever read. And it's great because it makes you think about humanity and our place in the food chain. It is a fucked up book. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that, like, this book is anything but that. However, it really makes you think. And that's not like, a lot of people read books to escape from thinking. And I totally get it. Totally understand that. But I'm a kind of person, and I have someone in my life who we get to very deep talks about different things like this. But I like to think about these situations and think about things that are normal to me and how they actually are. So,
mhm.
like I said, this whole book, it just kind of really shows a lot about humanity because, in real life, if you kidnapped someone and kept them to make you children, that's really fucked up. In this
Yep.
book, though, it's not necessarily looked as fucked up because, yeah, it's kind of illegal that they kept Jasmine, but she's not looked upon as a human. So it's just absolutely crazy to make you think about humanity as a whole. So
Yeah.
that is tender as the flesh. I am so sorry if I, scarred any of you.
Oh, that was crazy.
Like I said,
I'm
all of my go ahead.
I'm just so like Marcos. Well, I guess Cecilia
Mhm.
was like, that was our breeder cow that you just killed for no reason.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
It's it's a lot. And like I said, I had a lot of friends who had read this and their immediate text to me afterwards was, "Stasha, what the fuck?" And that was so my fault. If like I said, if you were any of those 5 girls from that group, you know who you are. I'm so sorry. I should never have done that to you. But in the horror community, this is a really popular book. A lot of the influencers I follow love this book, always recommend it.
Mhm.
So, a lot of the books I read are very dark. This is one of the darkest, but I just love a good morbid plot. But I'm not going to do too many morbid plots on this show just because I don't want to scar all of you. So, like, the one I'm going to do next episode is definitely, I told Jordan this earlier, it has cannibalism in it, but not in this way at all. It's kind of different in almost a lighthearted way, if you can put it that way.
Yeah, because that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes so much sense. So, anyway, I promise next time will be one. It's the next one we do is actually one of my favorite books of all time. I have never given this book to someone and they've not loved it with all their heart.
Mhm.
Never. This is one that's like has a very high rating on Goodreads, incredible reviews. It's the next one is definitely one of my absolute favorites. So you will have to tune in next week to hear that one because it is so worth every minute of your time.
Hell yeah. Yeah, my
Hell
book
yeah.
for next week will be maybe fake dating.
Oh,
Maybe rom-com but definitely not too much.
I love a
It'll
good palate
be
cleanser.
Yeah, it'll be set in the real world. So we're doing another real world romance book, but
Love.
really, really good. I was actually surprised I liked it as much as I did. So
But that's the best kind of book is when you go in being like, all right, well, this has been on my TBR. I might as well read it. And then you end up
right.
absolutely loving it. Yeah, it's the
Exactly.
best kind of surprise. But
Yeah.
we will see you guys next week.
Yeah.
Um,
See you guys next week.
Definitely make sure to follow us on Instagram
Mhm.
at Completely Checked Out Pod. Make
Mhm.
sure to like and subscribe from wherever you are listening. Pretty
Yeah.
please, cherries on top.
Yeah, we're on YouTube. We're on Spotify. Everywhere you can get a podcast, we are
Yes,
there.
absolutely. But thank you guys so much, and we will see you next week.
See you next week.
Bye
Bye.
bye.